Welcome back to recapLa, where we revisit films that leave a lasting impact. Today, we're diving into Casualties of War, 1989, a powerful and heartbreaking film about the brutal realities of war. It's more than just a battle story, it's a deep look into the moral conflicts soldiers face when humanity collides with violence. What choices would you make when the lines between right and wrong blur on the battlefield? Let's explore this intense and gripping tale. The movie opens in 1974 with a war veteran named Max Eriksen sitting on a subway train. When a young Vietnamese woman boards the train, Eriksen gazes at her with a troubled look. She suddenly reminds him of his time in the Vietnam War. The scene then shifts to a flashback. During the Vietnam War in 1966, a team of American scouts gets admission to search for secret tunnels used by the Viet Cong to launch surprise attacks. One night, while they're in a dense forest, they hear mortar fire. They observe the map and realize that nearby soldiers are under attack by the enemy. Lieutenant Riley instructs his team to listen to the gunfire to figure out where the enemy is and then inform the headquarters about their current location. Suddenly, out of fear, one of the soldiers starts shooting at a Vietnamese soldier. This blows their cover and the enemy is alerted to their location. Soon, mortar fire starts raining down and some soldiers are killed while others scramble to safety. In the meantime, young Private First Class Max Eriksen, who is patrolling alone, seeks shelter when he hears an explosion nearby. Suddenly, the ground shakes, causing him to fall into a hidden Viet Cong tunnel, where his legs get stuck. As air support arrives and begins to attack the enemy, Eriksen remains trapped in the tunnel. Unbeknownst to him, a Viet Cong soldier with a knife approaches him silently through the narrow tunnel. Before he can attack, Sergeant Tony Meserve manages to rescue Eriksen. The Americans then regroup and take the enemies down, one after another. The next morning, Eriksen, Meserve and their squad, comprising Corporal Thomas Clark, Private Hatcher, and Sergeant Brownie, go to a nearby river village for temporary shelter. Eriksen is different from the rest of his squad because he's kind to the local children, unlike his colleagues who are suspicious of everyone in Vietnam. Despite the tense atmosphere of war, Eriksen keeps his humanity intact by treating the locals respectfully and offering help when needed. Later, Sergeants Brownie and Meserve remind their soldiers of the importance of obeying orders without question, especially as their time in Vietnam is coming to an end. However, at that moment, Viet Cong soldiers are hiding in the bushes, along with local informants. They suddenly open fire on the Americans and fatally injure Sergeant Brownie. This catches the American soldiers completely off guard, but they manage to repel the attack and kill the enemies. Following this incident, Meserve's squad is given a 48-hour leave, and they plan for a night out in the nearby town. However, their leave is abruptly cancelled, and they are ordered to report for patrol at 6 a.m. the next day. That evening, they carry out a scouting mission in the area. Meserve, saddened by the loss of his close friend Brownie, expresses his desire to seek comfort in the company of a local girl in the nearest village. Later that night, the squad arrives at their outpost gate to venture into the village. However, a guard and their company commander deny them entry to a brothel. The commander informs them that the area remains off limits to them. As a result, the squad is forced to stay confined to their location until further orders are given. Understanding they're stuck, the soldiers head back to the barracks and wait for their morning march. Sergeant Meserve then introduces Private First Class Antonio Diaz to the group as a replacement for the late Brownie. Meserve briefs the squad on their next mission and reveals that they will depart the following day, 2 hours earlier than planned. He wishes to visit the neighboring village and kidnap a local girl for their own gratification. Eriksen is shocked by his superior's outrageous and criminal statement. He shares his worries with his friend, but the latter reassures him that Meserve must be joking. Unfortunately, the following morning, the squad reaches the village and forcibly takes a young girl named Tan Thia On away from her family. Meserve informs Eriksen that they will be having fun with the girl once they get to their outpost. Soon after, chaos erupts in the village as relatives plead with the soldiers to spare the girl. However, the soldiers turn a deaf ear to all their appeals. Instead, they commit a terrible act against the girl's sister, leaving Eriksen shocked and unable to believe his comrades could do such a thing. After kidnapping the village girl for their sick amusement, the soldiers continue with their duties. Eriksen confronts Sergeant Meserve, insisting that what they've done is a crime crime, but the latter ignores his objections and sends him on patrol. Meanwhile, Private Hatcher and Corporal Clark see no problem with Mezer's actions, treating them as entertainment. Later, the group takes a break and attempts to interact with the captive girl. Clark approaches her first, but he is interrupted by Hatcher, who thinks that he sees someone in the bushes. He fires a shot, only to discover it was just an animal. The squad then realizes that the gunshot could have given their position to the enemy, so they decide to move on, delaying any further interaction with the girl. A few hours later, they come across an abandoned wooden cabin deep in the woods. While Meserve, Clark, and Hatcher scout the area, Diaz and Erickson clean up the cabin. Diaz turns out to be a decent person who doesn't want to mistreat the girl, because they share the same perspective. Diaz and Erickson agree to support each other. They want to make sure that no one is forced into committing a crime. Erickson then approaches the captive girl Owen, showing compassion and care toward her. He successfully gains her trust and tends to her injuries. Later, when the rest of the squad returns to the cabin, Sergeant Meserve suggests they forcefully interrogate the girl. He ties her hands and outlines the order in which the soldiers will have their way with her. Erickson is certainly horrified by the plan. He and Diaz oppose the idea, saying they will not participate in the assault. However, the sergeant threatens to make them outcasts if they don't comply. This scares Diaz, and he reluctantly agrees to participate in the horrific act. Enraged, Erickson attempts to help the girl, but Clark holds a knife to his throat and orders him to stand guard for the night. A helpless Erickson then watches his comrades committing the heinous act. The next morning, the squad arrives at a hillside and positions themselves on a railroad bridge overlooking a Viet Cong river supply depot. They leave Owen with Clark back in the cabin. Nearby, they spot a group of armed Vietnamese transporting artillery shells. They report the coordinates to headquarters and keep an eye on the enemy while preparing for their mission. Sometime later, Erickson and Hatcher return to the outpost to resupply and get smoke grenades. When they arrive at the cabin, Clark becomes hesitant to stay with the girl, so he orders Erickson to take his place. Once they are alone, Erickson fully grasps the extent of Owen's abuse. She is weak, cut and bruised, dehydrated, and sick. He feels terrible for her state, so he unties her and offers her something to eat and drink. Back at the railroad bridge, Sergeant Meserve is enraged when his men return without Erickson, so he orders Clark to go back to the outpost to fetch him. The sergeant is worried that Erickson might do something drastic. In the meantime, Erickson decides to help Owen return to her village. However, she's too scared to go alone, so she begs for Erickson to accompany her. Erickson realizes that leaving the outpost with Owen would make him a deserter. He could be punished for this. However, seeing the poor girl's desperate plea, he decides to go through with it. Just as they are about to escape, Clark arrives and stops them. He forces them to rejoin the squad on the railroad bridge. Sadly, Erickson and Owen are dragged to the bridge and ordered to stay put as the squad waits to launch their attack. Owen suddenly starts coughing due to her weak health condition. Meserve realizes that she could risk their position, so he orders Erickson to kill her. Our hero refuses, so the sergeant commands Hatcher to do it, but he also hesitates. As helicopters approach in the distance, Meserve urgently orders Diaz to kill her. Under his senior's pressure, Diaz decides to do the unthinkable. Just then, Erickson fires his rifle into the air to draw the Viet Cong's attention and successfully prevents the murder. During the ensuing shootout between the American and Vietnamese soldiers, Clark stabs Owen multiple times. Sadly, Erickson doesn't notice them as he's too focused on fighting off the enemies. The situation becomes critical as the Viet Cong brings mortars up the river and starts shooting the bridge, but Meserve and his team retaliate well by using a machine gun to take out the enemies one after another. In the meantime, a heavily injured Owen gets up and attempts to escape through the bridge below. When Meserve notices her, he orders the squad to shoot her. Erickson tries to stop them, but Meserve strikes him with his gun and knocks him down. After this, the squad shoots the poor girl multiple times, killing her on the spot. Her lifeless body then falls off the bridge and lands on the ground below. Following the incident, Meserve leads his men away from the scene. While Erickson lies on the railroad alone, he faintly sees the American choppers conducting an airstrike on the enemy's riverboat and also notices Owen's mutilated body below. The resulting explosion ignites a nearby U.S. Navy boat, killing all of its crew. Soon after, Erickson is evacuated by helicopter. He wakes up in a hospital and confides in his friend Rowan about the kidnapping, assault, and murder of Owen. Rowan understands his concern and advises tells him to speak with Lieutenant Riley. Erickson does the same, but sadly, Riley responds with a lengthy explanation. He emphasizes how the incident could tarnish the unit's operational record and implies that it would be best to forget about it. Determined to seek justice, our hero risks his military career by disobeying Riley's orders and reporting the incident to Captain Hill. However, Hill also responds harshly and reprimands Erickson. He warns him that pursuing the matter might result in severe sentences for the soldiers and could lead to retaliation against Erickson and his family when the convicted men are released. In the meantime, Meserve learns that Erickson had reported about Owen to the senior officers. This fills him with rage, and he decides to kill him with a grenade. That night, Erickson becomes suspicious when he sees Hatcher standing at the latrine door and running away quickly. Thankfully, he spots the grenade and quickly leaps out of the latrine just before it explodes. Erickson then confronts Meserve and the rest of the perpetrators. He tells them that everyone already knows what they've done. However, the authorities don't want to listen to him. He suggests they leave him alone because they are never going to be convicted for their heinous crime. Erickson later drowns his sorrows at a bar. A minister approaches him and asks him about his mood. Although Erickson is aware that justice won't be served, he confides in the minister about the tragedy of the village girl. Soon, an investigation is launched and Owen's body is discovered in the riverside. This escalates to tension within the unit, and Captain Hill informs Erickson that his actions will have consequences because he couldn't let the situation go. In the next scene, all the soldiers are interviewed individually and they accept their crimes. As a result, they are court-martialed. Meserve is sentenced to 10 years of hard labor, DS to 8 years, Hatcher to 15, and Clark to life. As they leave the court, Meserve leans in close to Erickson and whispers something inaudible with a wicked look in his eyes. "How dare you give us exactly what we deserved?" The scene then shifts to the present. Erickson wakes up from his haunting flashback on the train. When it reaches the next stop, the Vietnamese woman, who reminds him of Owen, disembarks. He notices that she has left her scarf behind. Erickson quickly picks it up and exits the train to return it to her. When he approaches the woman, she notices a haunted expression on his face. When asked about it, Erickson tells her that he just woke up from a nightmare. The woman then thanks him for the scarf and offers him comfort, assuring him that his nightmare is now behind him. As the movie comes to a close, a faint smile appears on Erickson's face. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.